Hello everyone, Citrus here, back with week 6 of the Seeker Devlog. And I know there was not a video last week, very sad, very unfortunate. I had spring break, I was working at the grocery store that I have a job at, I was looking for internships, I was doing homework, working out at the gym, lots of stuff going on. I was super busy and did not have time to work on the game or release a devlog for it. So this is all stuff that I did this week, and I actually did get a fair amount done. A lot of it today, because I was kind of just like, well, I can do this, this will be easy. All right, one more thing, then I'll finally make the devlog. And yeah, one thing just led to another. It was a whole... I need to get this obsessed all the time, because I will make so much progress. It'll be great. But yeah, so as you probably noticed, I am once again in a different maze this week. This is 10 by 10 tiles instead of the original 5 by 5 and then the 20 by 20 that I had last week. So much different maze size. I call it the Goldilocks maze because it's just right. Not too big, not too small. I think this is a pretty good size. And I'll try to keep most of the devlog in here just to kind of give you all a good view of it. But one thing you might have noticed is these swords. There are 4 swords floating around the character. The reason for that is I could not figure out how to properly animate an attack happening with the actual character model, because there wasn't really a good way to attach a sword to it. The transform position of the hands was actually on the ground somehow, and then the original creators of this model managed to they animated the mesh moving, but not the transforms. So if I try to take a sword and make it the child of that, the weapon will just kind of stay on the ground, because the transform of the hands is on the ground, staying exactly where it is. It's not moving at all during the animation. And I tried to kind of look into the actual animations themselves to see how they were made, and it was read only, so I couldn't modify it in any way to try and fit the sword in there along with the animation. So that was disappointing, but I decided, you know what, if I can't make the character hold a sword, I will just make this game even more fantasy and have a bunch of swords floating around the character, and you attack by spinning them. And the only way you can actually deal any damage is when the swords are spinning. If you could just walk through and deal damage passively, that'd be a little bit insane. But as you can see here, some of these enemies are changing color, and that's because I made it so that when they get to low health, that will be indicated by a physical change in the enemy's appearance. And right now that's simply changing its color. Hopefully if I do get better models for these, there will be another cool way I can sort of change how they appear so that they look like they're about to die. And yeah, that was an interesting thing to implement. I also have a damage power up here. If I would have been using that, they would have died in one shot. And I don't know if that's exactly how I want the damage buff to go, but that's how it stands right now. And there will hopefully be some ranged combat in the future. I was previously thinking of having that just be a common bow and arrow, but I think now that I've got these floating swords, why not make the ranged attack throwing the swords? I think that could be really cool, and I think it's kind of hilarious how not being able to animate properly has kind of opened up all these unique opportunities for me in terms of how I can kind of carry the combat system going forward. But I think that about covers it for the stuff in-game. There's attacking, there's power-ups to help with attacking, there's enemies now that change color when they get to low health, but they still behave exactly kind of how they did last week. But one thing I do want to show off is... So the other thing I kind of wanted to show off was just how the maze is constructed compared to the past ones. So with this smaller maze, you could kind of pick up a sprint power-up and just run right through it, and you'd never actually really get stuck anywhere, because if you notice, a lot of these dead-end areas are just very small. You could kind of go down them and then just turn around and walk back out, and there's not much consequence to it, really. You don't actually have to retrace your steps or think too hard about where you're making turns, because it really doesn't matter in the end. You're just going to kind of be able to keep moving forward and reach that end goal in, I think, less than a minute was kind of what was happening most of the time when I had the sprint power up and was playtesting with that maze. Whereas with this one, It's not complete, obviously, and that's because I'm kind of taking my time. This one might be closer to what the finalized version might look like. You can kind of see there's some big gaps where I might be able to put some story elements. There's some places where the player might be able to go up onto the maze with like this solid cube thing that I've got going here. And so these kinds of things might make this more of a finalized product than these original prototypes. But also, there's these parts where you can kind of go down a path, and for a while it'll lead you on, but then it actually gets you nowhere. It doesn't lead you to this like big open area or any closer to any end result of this maze. So this kind of feels more like a maze where the choices you make and the places you choose to turn have more of an impact, since you can actually get stuck and just have to retrace your steps and hope that a bunch of enemies didn't just corner you. And I think that's kind of capturing more of the essence of what a labyrinth should feel like. But it did kind of pose this question for me of, do I really want to make this a maze game at all? Because for me personally, mazes are exciting, mazes are fun. There's also the plus of like it's really, really simple to just have textured walls, and that kind of looks like you would want it to for a map. But looking at this big maze, it kind of had me thinking like this maze was kind of weird because it didn't feel like a maze. It almost felt more like a village where these walls could be buildings, and that would actually make it kind of feel like how it was feeling from a gameplay perspective, aesthetically, if I just turn these walls into actual buildings. And maybe that's more fun in the end, because something I've been hearing a lot lately is don't make a game for yourself, don't make a game based on what you want, make something that's actually going to sell, like what the market wants. And I know that personally, like I have a bias towards mazes, I think they're cool, but maybe that's frustrating for some people, having to like go down these corridors and then you might get stuck and then you've just wasted 30 seconds or whatever it was going down this path that kind of led you nowhere. And that could be frustrating for a lot of players and probably not something a ton of people want. I wanted to make a maze game partially because it was something I wanted and because it was something I felt like there wasn't a lot of, but there's maybe a reason for that. Maybe mazes are frustrating to most players. So if you have any thoughts on that, please let me know down in the comments below. Do you think this should continue to be sort of a maze exploration game, or should it maybe switch to a more classic RPG with like villages and forests and such? Because I think the story could still be told through that medium if I really wanted it to, and it might make the map design a little less frustrating to some people. But that's something I need external feedback on, because my personal bias is telling me mazes are cool and I should continue with the mazes, and it's also easy. So as a developer, I'm like, yeah, let's continue with this thing that's super easy to do. But yeah, that's all of the progress for this week. I hope you enjoyed seeing this much nicer looking maze with the textures and everything, along with some of the other cool things I had to add. There will certainly be more in the week to come, so I hope to see you next week. Thank you for watching. Peace out.